Alrighty, my friends, it is Science Saturday, and I can't even tell if I'm live. Super excited. Okay, no, now I'm live. Hello, everybody. It is Science Saturday. It is a completely beautiful day outside here in Maine, and we are working on compost. So it's a good thing you guys don't have smell-o-vision because I smell like compost. So welcome to Science Saturday, and it's so Saturday is the day that we talk about a science topic because I love science, and science is super important in our lives. And then I'm even actually wearing a science shirt. Look, because I'm a geology major, erosion happens. So this was from our trip to the Grand Canyon this winter, which seems like 9,000 years ago. And then we're going to talk about declaring results in our relationships and what, like kind of a journey that I've been on in April about that. So oops, I'm cutting myself off from the camera. All right, I won't move too close. All right, so I want to talk about drug repurposing. All right, so this is, when I choose on what to do on Science Saturday, I kind of scan what people have been talking about in Facebook and then what they're talking about in the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, so that I can see what questions people have and answer those. And I think today I'm going to put my lab animal medicine hat on, and I'm going to talk about drug repurposing and the drug development cycle and kind of what some of that stuff looks like, at least from the perspective of how I experienced it as somebody who was a lab animal vet. And so there are some things to think about. So, of course, as soon as the virus hit, our doctors were looking for therapies to give people that helped, right? And while drug development has come a long way, it's its own very specialized, unique sort of business, there are some big steps that I can explain that will make the process, I think, a little more clear to people, okay? So here's what we are doing right now. So in your novel drug development process, essentially what we do is with these gigantic databases, okay? A lot of this is all done on computers now. We have these gigantic databases that are continually testing molecule structures and using artificial intelligence, for lack of a better way of explaining it, to try and see if novel molecules will act against things that happen in cells that we already know cause a reduction in illness, okay? So when we're looking, for example, for a new anti-cancer medication, okay, we'll scan structures of molecules, okay, from plants, from synthesized structures, like they're like out there, okay? And we'll see if, does this protein look like it would look like it might match up with this sort of protein in the cell, so the drug protein, okay, match up with this sort of protein in the cell, or the drug molecule match up with this sort of protein in the cell, and cause that protein to do something to the cell, which is something we know works against a disease, okay? And so we try and create drugs based on what we already know, okay? So probably one of the easiest ways to explain this is anti-inflammatory drugs. So we have two kinds of anti-inflammatory drugs: non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. There's one inflammatory pathway, okay? This is why these can be blockbuster drugs, is because one, everybody has an inflammatory pathway. Two, if you're lucky enough to age, you will have inflammatory changes in your body. And so, like, everybody's a potential customer, right? But the way the agents of inflammation happen, there's a very clear pathway that you can target with drug molecules, okay? Same thing with clotting. If someone's got a clotting disorder, there are very clear pathways to attack and have a reasonable likelihood of success, okay? And then what we do is we just keep narrowing and narrowing and narrowing, all right? And so what I want to explain today is kind of how that's working with the coronavirus drugs. Okay, so there are, in just looking at some of the articles, there are antivirals that we're using. So they're anti-malarial drugs that we've tried. Okay, guys, there's no indication that they are efficacious. Okay, there are antivirals like remdesivir, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that look like they act on certain proteins within the cell and then prevent those proteins from binding up the coronavirus. So the coronavirus, remember what I explained last week, is that the coronavirus attaches to proteins and then causes the cell to make more coronavirus. Well, there's some indications that remdesivir helps inhibit that. Okay, so that would be a potential way to protect our bodies against the drug, against the virus, right? There are some indications that there are some drugs that have osteoporosis. Okay, and the osteoporosis, all right, is a process by which bones weaken, usually in women, and there are lots of like hormonal pathways and things that happens with. But women lose calcium out of their bones, usually lose phosphorus as well. But that happens, and the osteoporosis drugs prevent that by binding to proteins to make sure that the calcium doesn't leave the bone, right? So again, we're acting on proteins in the cell, all right? Arthritis, an anti-inflammatory pathway, whenever a cell is undergoing attack by a virus, inflammatory mediators will get kicked out because that's what cells do. That's humoral immunity. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, okay? So what happens is they take likely classes of drugs, okay, and they run them through these gigantic screening programs, all right? And then, so we call that in silico testing, like on a silica chip. Now, here's something also really cool. There are scientists out there that are taking cultured human lung cells that are grown on a silica chip that can monitor in real time what's happening with the cell as it's infected and treated with drugs, which I think is just like the coolest thing, okay? So once we pass the database screening, okay, and then the other kinds of computer screening, we have likely candidates, and those candidates have a likelihood that they will work, okay? So we are pretty sure that remdesivir is like 20 times more efficacious than chloroquine, all right? Once we have that idea, we move it into in vitro testing. In vitro means in glass, which means we do it on a petri dish. We take cultured cells, and I want to take a moment right here to recommend everybody read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Okay? If you haven't read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, that is one of the best science books out there. And we, as a human race, owe a debt of gratitude and money to the Lacks family for what we did to Henrietta and what we did not compensate her for. Okay? The reason we have cells that can be grown in vitro to do this sort of stuff is because a doctor took them from the cervix of Henrietta Lacks without her consent, patented them, and distributed them around the world, and she got nothing for it. Okay, she didn't even, I don't even think, got really well treated for her cancer. Right, and so go read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Right, so we do in vitro testing with cells that we can perpetuate growing because we know how to grow cells because of Henrietta Lacks's cervical cancer cells. Right, once we test these drugs in vitro and we see what happens to them based on what they're doing on petri dishes and how things are growing and all that sort of stuff, and we run them through, we do proteomics, okay, and we separate out proteins and gene expression, all this sort of stuff. It's really pretty cool, okay. Then we have and by this time it's down to a handful of drugs, like half a dozen drugs, okay, that we can then put into animal trials. All right. Now, I was a laboratory animal veterinarian. I believe in testing on animals because I don't believe in testing on people. Okay, those are our choices because we don't know how things are safe. And the laboratory animal community has been applying what we call the 3 R's, which is not reduce, reuse, and recycle, but it's we go lower down in the phylogenetic tree. So instead of using a chimpanzee, we use a hamster, okay? Instead of using a hamster, we use a fish, right? So we go lower down on the phylogenetic tree, okay? We use fewer animals and do better cohort analysis, okay? And we have more well-defined endpoints, all right? And so it's very well controlled. If you have questions about how the lab animal medicine world works, feel free to talk to me, right? So we do animal-based trials. In order for a drug to come to phase 1 clinical trials, which is human trials, they have to go through a certain number of species in animals. We've got to test them in like a rodent species, and then usually we choose between testing them on dogs and testing them on monkeys. And we do LD50, which is what dose leaves 50% of the animals dead. We don't really do that on dogs. We really do that in lower species like mice and rats. And we do that because we have to understand something called the pharmacokinetics of it, right? Because if we're going to take an antiviral or we're going to take an anti-cancer drug, all right, and we're going to give it to a sick patient, we have to know what it's going to do to them. And we have to know where, like, we probably already know where the drug is metabolized. It's going to be metabolized in the kidneys. It's going to be metabolized in the liver most often, right? We have to know then what that does to a person who's got coronavirus, right? Because we're introducing this whole novel comorbidity for, you know, like an antiviral that was designed to go after hepatitis or HIV or whatever. I don't know what remdesivir was originally for. But now we have a whole nother kind of virus in there, all right? Or we're taking an anti-cancer drug. Anti-cancer drugs can be incredibly broad. Single genetic drugs just don't exist yet, right? We can't do, you know, and this is the golden ticket in cancer is finding the mutation that happens in an individual and being able to manipulate that individual's genetics so that the mutation stops happening and the cancer stops growing. Like that's what we're going for, but we're not there yet, okay? And so we do animal-based trials so that we can understand what that drug is going to do to humans, okay? And it's incredibly important to do that because human life is precious. Animal life is precious. That's why I was a lab animal veterinarian. And I did everything. I mean, that's one reason I'm so good at statistics is because I analyzed the statistics of the graduate students when they would submit their trials to something called the IACUC, the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, which is the animal equivalent of what's called an IRB, the Institutional Review Board, right? And I would kick back they were so mad at me, oh my God. They would get really pissed because nobody ever questioned their statistics, because nobody did their statistics. And that was me protecting animals as a lab animal vet. Okay, so there are lots and lots of safeguards in place. I know it's an unpleasant thing to talk about, but disease is violent, and so medicine is violent, okay? And until we figure out better, less violent ways, and we're continuing to figure out less violent ways, it's one of the realities of the world that we live in, okay? So we go from animal trials and we go to phase 1 human trials, okay? And phase 1 human trials have to be very carefully designed because if you give the drug to somebody who's already sick and they die, that has to go through peer review, friends, okay? That looks really bad in peer review. Now, maybe it's what happened, but were they going to die anyway? Were they so sick they were going to die anyway? We don't know, and that's why we've got to do all of this super, super careful testing, and that's why this stuff takes so long, okay? So we go into human trials, we try it on populations where we think it will be successful, and then we expand that into all the way, I think, through phase 3 clinical trials. I worked in preclinical trials, that's the animal side of the house. And then we go to like phase 3 clinical trials. And while the drug is doing all of that, as we are taking drugs that are already labeled out on the marketplace, they have to be approved by the FDA to get relabeled for use against coronavirus, okay? It's a long process by design. There are probably arguments to be made that it is more cumbersome than necessary. And it is definitely more political than necessary. But it's the system that we have, okay? And it's not going to change during coronavirus. It may change as a result of coronavirus, but I'm going to change during coronavirus, okay? So then the FDA has to approve these labels, and then the drug can go into much more widespread treatment. It can go around the world. But then here's what's happening. Here's the other issue around drug development, is that as our drugs get increasingly more complex, it gets more and more difficult for us to understand all of the side effects, okay? Drugs have side effects, all right? And sometimes we don't know until a very long time afterwards how harmful those side effects are, okay? And then what happens is we pull the drugs from the market, people have already been harmed, and then the lawyers come in, okay? So behind all of this work is a whole slew of people doing risk mitigation against the company, for the companies who are trying to bring drugs to market in the best way possible, okay? And so there are lots of things that we have to balance in that, but that's the reality as we experience it right now, okay? And there are a lot of lawyers that make a lot of money on drugs going out onto the marketplace where afterwards it is decided that the side effects are intolerable, when in many cases the drug company was making a good faith effort to like help cure a disease or otherwise help people, okay? Very complex subject. But that's some of the stuff, but we have to learn how to have those complex discussions, because we've lost more people, you know, in this like past 6 weeks that coronavirus has been around than we lose in a year to the flu. Well, okay. We've now lost more Americans than died in Vietnam. This is really affecting people. And my urge to you, and now as we are moving into the coaching portion of our programming, is to think about when we're declaring results in our relationships, okay? And there really is a tie-in here, okay? We have reached a point in our society where we cannot have a discussion across political lines, okay? And I am as guilty of that as other people, okay? For those of you who do not know, I am from Newtown, okay? I was not directly affected by the shooting, but I was very profoundly affected by the shooting. I didn't live in Newtown. We actually, when we moved to Maine in August, and the shooting happened in December. I was trying to move home. I was trying to move back to Newtown, but we couldn't afford the taxes, so we came to Maine instead. So I wouldn't have had a kid in Sandy Hook, probably, because I wasn't really looking on that side of Newtown when we were looking at houses. But I would have had a kid in the Newtown school systems, and I and my brother are products of the Newtown school systems. And something broke in me, I'm not gonna lie, after that shooting, when I watched what happened to my town and the deniers come, because there's, and the only thing I can think about is that there is something so profoundly scary about a kid from your own high school going and shooting up a elementary school. But I really feel like something broke in us as a society, and was breaking then. And it came, it came when, Obama was president, and there were so many people who hated Obama. And it came, and then, and then other things happened. But as I have been talking about, relationships are created in our minds. And one of the things that's really, truly very difficult is that when people are denying the humanity and denying the dignity of people who are trying to help, okay? So there was a picture of the armed takeover of the Michigan State House by white people this week. And I watched a lot of the discussion, okay, on Facebook. And it's so clear that our ability to understand our own fear and sadness in relationships is broken. There's this picture of this guy who's like hollering at this police officer. Both of them are white. And believe it or not, they are in a relationship there, okay? And they are both declaring the results that they wish out of that relationship. The police officer is standing there, okay, with a mask on, and then there's this angry white man, like probably spitting, like when you're that forcibly speaking, you're probably spitting. Both of them are probably scared. And it's very difficult to face the reality of the relationships that we create when we are unwilling to feel our own feelings and understand how our own feelings create the results that we want. So if you are not creating the results that you want in your life, all of our results that we create probably have other people involved in them. There are some that don't. When my husband and I argue, my relationship results and my ability to feel sad when we argue is 100% me, right? His feelings about when we argue are 100% him. Those two guys, it's 100% him and it's 100% him, okay? And that, when you hear people talk about taking 100% responsibility, that's what we're talking about. They're both 100% responsible for the relationship that they are in, because they are definitely in a relationship, okay? And what does it look like in your life to declare yourself 100% responsible, and that's the result that you are going for, that you're 100% responsible for all the relationships that you have in your life, because you are, and if you want to have different results in the relationships that you have, then do something different. So, okay, there are people who I'm not in relationship with over political differences, okay? And as I'm sure everybody knows, I am like as liberal as they come. Though I will say, you put me in a group of liberals, I'm the conservative, and you put me in the group of conservatives, and I'm the liberal, right? Which kind of means I'm kind of middle of the road. And so there are deeply held beliefs, and there are boundaries that we create around our relationships. And the question is are you creating boundaries around your relationships and creating results around your relationships that are building you up, okay, and getting you the results that you want, or not? And it's really kind of that simple. So there are people who I don't speak to because of how they feel about the current administration. I'm not going to lie, okay? Because there are ways that I don't want my children affected by people who are on the fence about some of the things that the administration has done, right? And so that's a decision I've made. That's a boundary that I have put up, and that boundary is 100% me, and I take 100% responsibility for it. I'm totally okay with it because I did it out of love, okay? And so sometimes when we are in relationships and we ask our questions, about whether or not we want to be in a relationship with one person or be in a relationship with another person or whatever, we look inside ourselves, okay? And we look at like how we act and how we feel, okay? And a lot of times the question is do you feel good, right? And when you decide that about whether or not the thoughts that you are creating about the relationship that you are contemplating or that you are in or whatever, do you feel good about it, right? You can ask yourselves those questions and tell yourself the truth about the results, okay? And of all of the work, the eating, the drinking, the working instead of working, the actual work, incoming money, outgoing money, telling ourselves the truth about relationships is probably one of the hardest, because we're conditioned to think that other people are like 50% responsible, that it's the other person's fault, right? I don't feel the way I feel because Donald Trump does anything. It's 100% in my own thoughts, right? But we're not, but nobody teaches you that. Like, I teach you that, so here I am teaching you that, all right? And what does it look like if you're gonna go out and declare results in your relationships? To be 100% responsible with that, okay? With those results, and really tell yourself the truth about the results that you have. Because the truth of the matter is I'm 100% okay with my relationship with Donald Trump. He has no idea that we have a relationship, right? I don't hate the man, not at all, because hate is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. And because I come from a place in my heart that I feel good about, that I understand what my boundaries are, then I can work much more efficaciously to bring about changes that I want to see, right? And that's true of a relationship that you have with somebody who you don't even know, or a relationship that you have with the person that you live with. So if I want to see changes in my relationship with Andrew, all I have to do is look inside, and I create those results in me, right? I create those results in me. And the more I look inside and understand how I'm thinking and feeling and acting in relationship to Andrew, okay, the better our relationship becomes, because that's the results I'm going after, right? And I know it sounds a little odd, but practice it. Practice understanding when you're in conversation with somebody. Practice understanding, like, if I've totally offended you during this presentation, okay, during this Facebook Live, practice being in relationship with me and understanding exactly what you're thinking about me and what results it's creating in your life. And that would be amazing, right? Always be looking to the results that you create in your own life. I got haters, right? It's totally fine. What are the results that people are creating? That's really where the interesting thing is, right? So that's when you tell yourself the truth about your results, okay? You figure out all of your thoughts about them. And then you figure out all of your feelings. You decide, like, you work to understand why you have the results that you have. You work to want new results, if you want new results. Not everybody does. And then you declare the results to the world. So what are some results that you could declare to the world? And maybe the result is understanding and learning and really embodying being 100% responsible for all relationships. Maybe it's going out and finding a husband, right? Or finding a wife, right? Maybe it's having a baby. That's a new relationship. Whatever that relationship is, what does it look like to go out and declare those results? All right, my friends, it is a beautiful day. We are going to eat lunch, and we're going to plant a fig tree this afternoon and do a lot more raking. There are compost bins calling my name. I love you all. You are completely amazing. And tomorrow we're going to start a new section about dealing with discomfort. And I'm going to re-explain the belief bludgeon because it's super, super helpful. So if you're one of these people who don't understand why you've declared results to the world that you're going to make $1 million, and you haven't made $1 million yet, and you're beating the crap out of yourself because of that, tomorrow at noon is tune in. I love you all. You're completely amazing. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. And we'll see you at noon Eastern tomorrow. Bye, all.